Ever since the first Life is Strange game came out in 2015, I've considered myself a hardcore fan of the franchise. I've enjoyed every single one of the previous installments so far. I've considered them some of the best gaming experiences of all time. I've spoken a lot about this, and naturally, I was excited for Life is Strange True Colors, the third main entry in the franchise after Life is Strange 1, 2, Before the Storm, the prequel to Life is Strange 1, and now this new chapter. So I had moderately to high expectations about the game. I really wanted to go in fresh, so I didn't see many of the trailers, many of the plot details. I really wanted this to be a really heavy experience like I had with the previous two that really changed me a lot. And I have a lot of thoughts about it. Honestly, I think there's a lot to dissect in this game. And we'll start going, piece by piece to see what I liked and especially the things that I didn't like because I'm gonna criticize this game a lot. There are definitely some things that for fans of the franchise, fans of the previous Life is Strange games, they'll notice that they're not quite what we expect of this franchise. And also some things where it really shined. So I think this game has a lot of new mechanics, a lot of new writing, I guess, aspects that work for its detriment and also for the good of the game. So we'll discuss that and we'll see why this game is so weird to me because it felt really strange while I was playing it. So, in the spirit of Life is Strange, True Colors presents us with a story that combines drama, romance, supernatural elements, all these things into a game that it's basically like a choose your own adventure. So, you pick some of the heavy decisions that the character has to go through. And the main character's name is Alex Chen. I think her character was really well written. I think she's a great addition to the franchise and to the main characters of the Life is Strange universe. And I found herself to be like instantly likable. There were a lot of things that I wished we saw before from Alex, especially her relationship with Gabe in the beginning, because we don't really get to see much of that until episode 5. And that's something I think that should have been better if the game focused on Alex and her past from before. But that isn't to say that the way her character was handled was bad. I think it was great, and I'll especially discuss how her relationship with the other characters really has a good impact on the game. So a lot of True Color's story has to do with feelings and how those relate to each person and how that affects their decisions and their state of mind. It has really heavy themes on like mental health and the way we have to own our feelings sometimes. And I think it did a great job with that. I think this game does a great job with those aspects, but I'll try to compare this as least as possible with the other Life is Strange games because I really wanted to stand out on its own. But it's really hard also ignore its downfalls. I think this game had a lot of things that could have been done better, especially like in the middle. There's a lot of like really big like long areas that would have been cut from the game and it would have been awesome. So we'll talk about that first, but also we'll talk about Alex's power because I think it's a really big important not only this game to talk about. It's not only an important thing in this game, but also an important thing of the Life is Strange, the identity of the franchise. Before I criticize this, I really want to focus first on the positives, which is that the game is beautiful. I think this game is absolutely beautiful. There is beauty everywhere. I think that town of Haven, where the game is set in, is incredibly well detailed. The graphics are much better, especially with the new generation consoles. I think it really shines, and it really makes me wish there was a photo mode because I really love taking photos inside of video games. I think it has a lot of potential for it to be a great art form, and it would have been awesome to have it in Life is Strange True Colors. But I really thought everything was beautiful, especially with the music. I think the soundtrack was also great. It gave the game its own identity. The soundtrack was not as great as and memorable as the first one, but it was definitely better than the second one. I think the game's soundtrack and the way it uses beauty to tell the story is also essential to the Life is Strange franchise, and it did a great job at that. So there's plenty to do in Haven, but it's not like an open world setting where you can go and like do small things that have an impact on the story. Like most of the small things you do like on the side don't really have much of an impact, but it's still nice, like nice to see all the Easter eggs and all the small things that Alex can do. But other than that, I wish there were more important things to the story because the story is not really that interesting, and especially with Alex's power. So her power is basically to be an empath. She's kind of like Mantis from Guardians of the Galaxy. She can like feel other people, whether other people are feeling like anger or sadness or that kind of thing. And she basically knows what they're also thinking. So I think the biggest part of the game was that she can read minds. I think that there would have been more of a bigger focus on that, but the story is also like okay, the story is not anything great. There are actually like once or twice, like two times where her power actually does something interesting. One of them, well, I'm gonna spoil a little bit, but there's a scene where one of the characters is on the bridge and she knows something that the others don't, and like all the other characters have like happy feelings, like kind of like weird, like yellow for happy, but she has like blue, or I mean purple for the anxiety, so that kind of gives you a key clue. So if we saw more of that in the story, I think it would have been much, much better. There are also a couple other scenes where she absorbs another person's anger and sadness and she keeps it within her. And it actually, the game warns you before you do that. This is going to be a really impactful decision, but it doesn't really do much towards the ending. And I'll talk about the ending later because I have a lot to that I think about the ending. But I really wish the power would have been used in different ways, or that it had like a bigger impact for her in the final episode. If, for example, kind of like Max in the first Life is Strange, where she like abuses her power, so that causes like really catastrophic consequences, like really big supernatural events to happen. It would have been awesome to see something like that. And overall, I just felt like the game was really like boring. I don't know how to describe it. I mean, it was really chill, but it's still boring. Like, there's not much that I thought was like, oh, this is super interesting. And I remember like in the first episode, I was like, okay, don't worry, it's gonna get better later. It's gonna get better. It's gonna get better. And it didn't get, well, I mean, it did. There were a couple scenes that I thought were interesting and advanced the plot, but overall, I think the game would have been done in that department to give it like more interesting things to do. Because the first Life is Strange game is kind of like a murder mystery with really heavy supernatural elements, and then the second Life is Strange game was the most intense, which kind of like it was kind of like a Western story of two brothers that go, and there's like a lot of murder involved and a lot of really crazy, intense stuff, and that's something I would have liked. I would have liked more action, more really like big events that happened. For example, I think Life is Strange 2 had the best story. Um, and none of that really happened. There's like the story is really just disappointing. There's a plot there that I think it's interesting, like the whole Typhon plot, like trying to uncover the corruption behind the mining business that's controlling the town. And I admit it has like really important comment, like social commentary about corporate control, about how much power they have and that kind of stuff. I think it's important to address that. But overall, I wish it would have been told in a more interesting way, and they didn't spend much time like wasted on really like not I don't want to call it meaningless stuff because it was enjoyable, but just stuff that doesn't really advance the story. For example, episode 3 was quite the episode. It was just basically 2 hours, like an hour and a half of LARPing. Like there's this whole side plot of Alex trying to cheer up one of the characters, which is a small kid, and they basically go on like a LARPing adventure, which is like dressing up, playing pretend, gathering items, and it takes a long time to finish that section. And there were a lot of cringy moments. Well, the whole franchise has a lot of cringy moments, but this one especially made me realize, like, oh no, they should be focusing on the story, not on this LARP stuff. So that's one thing to consider. In addition to that, episode 4 only lasts like 45 minutes tops, and it really spends a lot of time just with like side character stuff and not really much that advances the story. That's something that I didn't like about this game. There's like a lot of filler. This is basically like a filler Life is Strange game. And it hurts me to say that because I liked a lot of its aspects, but it's just that like there's a lot of filler in there that I didn't enjoy. And I wish it would have cut to the chase from the beginning, give us more action. And and you might argue, okay, this game is more of a chill experience, but for me, after playing Life is Strange 2, which was a quite the ride from beginning to end, it was super intense and really satisfying. It had really satisfying endings compared to this one. I just think Life is Strange True Colors falls short in that. And it's definitely, I don't think it's worth the $60. So another thing I want to mention is that this game was released completely at once compared to the episodic nature of the previous games. So you had like the first episode released, and then 2 months after the second one, 2 months after the third. With the first one, the second one, Before the Storm, had that episodic format, and I enjoyed it much more because it keeps you waiting for the next one. It keeps you like grounded on the story. I don't know if it would have changed my opinion of the game if it was released through that way. Probably not, because it had I think the other games had much more emotional impact. And I actually played the first Life is Strange all at once compared to the episodic, so I can safely say that it's mostly on the game. But yeah, it basically keeps you talking longer about the game, keeps you thinking about it. It stays like more like it stays longer in your consciousness. So I think it's better that way. I think games who make these kind of games like choose like developers choose your own story adventure. I think they should release it in an episodic format. And speaking about making choices, I think the final part of the game, like the endings, was not that great. You get four different endings, but they're completely based. I mean, completely based on who you romance. So you can either romance either one of two characters, which are Ryan and Steph. I chose Steph, and it really just doesn't do anything. It just does that, like who you escape with Haven, like who you leave Haven with, or if you stay in Haven, and that's it. Basically, two binary choices with three different people, which is Steph, Ryan, or you. So it's basically six endings in total, and it's just that. It's just basically if you stay, if you go, play music, and that's it. There's nothing really intense. It's not like Life is Strange two endings, which were drastically different, and it actually mattered on what you did during the course of the game. Like you could actually change the whole outcome based on your relationship between the relationship between Sean and Daniel, which was super important to treat him well, to teach him about morality and that stuff. It was just much more enjoyable to have it that way. And that's my thought about the ending. I think it could have been much better and just not depending on who you date during the course of the game. So that really, really sucked and really disappointed me. So those are most of my main thoughts on the game. I think it was an okay experience. Probably people who play this franchise for the first time will enjoy it. For hardcore and longtime fans of Life is Strange, I don't think it's a good option to play. But it isn't to say it's a bad game. I think it was a good game. It had good moments and it had a really beautiful settings and music, and the characters were really great. I think, yeah, that's something I want to praise too. Is like every single character was likable, so it made the experience much more enjoyable. I think if it had bad characters, it would have been much worse. But I don't think it's a bad game per se. I just think it had a lot of like downfalls and a lot of things that didn't make any sense, and it could have been better and better pacing and just everything. I think it had a lot of places that could have been much more better from a conceptualized level. So I honestly liked it, but I wouldn't recommend it, and it's definitely not worth the $60. So it's more of a kind of like a spin-off Life is Strange game, to be honest. So I hope we actually get like a Life is Strange 3 because this one isn't it. So thus are kind of my thoughts, and yeah, I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm gonna give the game a 72 out of 100. I think that's right. I think it's not that bad. I think it's enjoyable, but it's definitely not up there with some of the better games I played. Definitely not up there with my Life is Strange games. They're actually the first three games are pretty much some of my favorite gaming experiences of all time. So it is nowhere near the quality of those, with the story, with the setting and the music and just basically the feeling it left me. I don't think it left me the same feeling it did with those games, but it isn't to say it was a bad game. I think it was okay. But anyways, that is everything for today. Thank you for watching this review. Thank you for watching my gameplays if you did. I stream on Twitch, so if you want to, watch me play and all the new titles, just go out there while I'm playing Far Cry 6 soon, so stay tuned. But anyways, that's everything for today. Have a nice day, everybody, and stay cool.